All right. I'm pleased to have Mr. Mace, Mr. John Mazanga. And the last time we were talking together, you said you were. Trying to remember the name. Um, Techno King.
Yeah, exactly.
Techno King is yeah.
Cool.
Welcome, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It's good to be here. I was really looking forward to be here when you told me like I should come through again.
Yeah.
I mean, Stega podcast is fully grown. It's
Yes.
become something bigger.
Yeah.
And that's great. And I mean, congrats for that.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Congrats
Thank you.
for that. So it's been a while. We haven't caught up in a long time, but there's a lot that's going on around the world, and I'm quite excited to actually have some discussions around that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talking about war, a lot that's exciting around the world, and I know we did say that we want to talk about some few topics, but I don't want to go. I don't want to take us back to what we talked about last time, human resources and.
I mean, I'll tell you what. I was basically today. I was listening to The Destroyer of Worlds by Dan Carlin. You know Dan Carlin, right?
Yes, I remember Dan Carlin. Yes.
Hardcore History. So Dan Carlin runs this podcast called Hardcore History, which
Yep.
is a completely, I think, must listen for anybody who's interested in world history. And a whole lot of the stuff that's happening in history is sort of repeating itself again and again and again. Like you watch the whole drama unfolds. So part of what I've been doing is studying Roman history. So I'm a big fan of Roman history. So I've been studying again sort of the rise and the decline of the Roman Empire. I'm just really thinking what's really going on in the world right now that is sort of a mirror of what was happening in Roman history. And the reason why Roman history is quite crucial is it is such a significant time in history where you have one empire that conquers almost 2/3 of Earth in terms of lengthwise, in terms of people. All of these were under a single rule. And that is more powerful than the United States of America as we know it today, and the Soviet Union as we know it today, and the Great China as we know it today. So you sort of have one empire that's there, that's sort of running this whole show, and just truly sort of understanding the dynamics of what was going on with sort of the Caesars of that time and the powerful men at that time, and how they managed to achieve that impact. For me, that's interesting. But more interestingly, it's like you look at this big empire and you think it's always going to be like that. Like the grass don't fall. Like no one would ever think at that time that Roman Empire would fall. So I'm always very curious, and I'm always very curious around how does that actually happen? Like there is sort of this sort of naive element to anyone that has never been there to underestimate what might happen. And that sort of plays in terms of what's going on right now in the war in Ukraine and Putin and the US and China. That everybody seems to be ignoring what might happen there. They say, okay, Putin might not push a button either by mistake, and then it becomes a whole different world altogether as we know it. People talk about nuclear war, like you're fighting a nuclear war. There's no back and forth when a nuclear war breaks up. When the bomb drops, it is Dan Carlin calls it the destroyer of the worlds. like in that moment, like almost anything can end. So the sort of seriousness of what's going on is we might be in a very pivotal moment in history where really bad things might happen, and we might find ourselves in a very difficult situation globally if that happens. So it's more serious than what a lot of people might think, in a sense. So I'm sort of watching that closely, but also going back into history and understanding, okay, what really happened in the wars in the Roman Empire, but also what happened in the wars that followed, the First World War and the Second World War. And now the one that's left is sort of the Third World War. And Einstein calls it, if there is a war that is going to be the Second World War, after that war, the Fourth World War will then we have to be fought by sticks and stones, which means civilization as we actually know it won't really exist after this war, because the amount of power at the moment that is within the nuclear bomb itself, it is so destructive that it's something like we've never seen before. So I'm sort of watching that closely. I don't know what you think about it. I know I've spoken to a number of people, but they seem not to really understand the impact of that, and sort of the difficulty of that is because we have fewer and fewer people really studying history. So if you have fewer and fewer people studying history, you only have the generation that have been, let's say, in real wars where bad things really happen, and people and children and women and children and men literally get destroyed. That if you've never seen it before and you've seen it in movies only, and then you see your hero getting an Oscar or whatnot, you say, okay, people don't die in war, right? Because sure. all you've seen is movies, right?
Yeah.
But the moment you actually get into history and live in that moment, like when I read the decline of the Roman Empire, I sort of put myself in that space and really sort of immerse myself in that, what was really going on in here, as if I have to live that. And because people really remember what they have seen and heard. Yeah. If you've never seen and heard something, you can underestimate the severity of what that might become. So which is sort of the challenge that we have at this moment with this war in Ukraine. And it might get really bad. It's not just a war in Ukraine, it's basically a proxy war amongst the great powers. This week, Andrew Blinken, the Secretary of State of America, he was talking about the G20, where China could not sign on anything regarding Ukraine. So China is taking themselves out of the whole scene, but them saying we are not for or against the war, it is low key. We are for the war, in a sense. Mm. Everyone else is sort of against the sort of Russia's invasions, so to say, but China is sort of putting themselves away from that. And America is there with the rest of the other countries, and then you have Russia on the other side. So now you sort of have a scenario where now you have the two greatest powers, apart from America, they are basically together, which is Russia and China. Mm-hmm. And if something really goes wrong, that's a big problem for the world, in a sense. Mm-hmm. These are the powers that actually have the nuclear with we have the nuclear forces, mm-hmm. in a way. So what would happen if someone pressed a button by mistake, let's say?
Mm. And I had Kim Jong-un as well. His missiles, apparently they can go a further distance now, as compared to how it was before.
Yeah. So I mean, it's basically these are madmen, right? These are basically madmen. So the way you look at it, not to compare someone like Putin with guys like Hitler or whatnot, but you can imagine if the guys like Caesar in the Roman Empire, had, this sort of nuclear warheads, these guys wouldn't be sort of afraid to basically press it, and in some cases just to see what happens, right?
Yeah.
To basically see what happens, and that's really the challenge with wars, that there is sort of, and I mean, we can discuss around what I think is really going on from just things like resources and energy and food and stuff like that, which are really quite key and central to this war. But some of the times people forget that wars are not really just about resources. At some point, things like ego, power, and really come into play.
Yeah.
So who is more powerful? Who is the guy here? And it's sort of who is the man, in a way. And you get one man who basically gets on there and he thinks he is the man. And if you go and say, we're going to prove that you're not the man, then we might run into big problems. And he might just press that thing.
Just to show that
show you that he is there.
I think he just, like how you just explained, because there was I'm not really that much understanding. I know that there are moving parts, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you are just in your own world and you don't want to worry about Putin, but you know that it's affecting you because the price of petrol, oil, it's going up, just because of the war. But there was apparently a video of a general, U.S. general back in the days. Unfortunately, we don't have a fact checker.
Yeah.
But whoever that's going to be listening to this can just check it. So this general was saying that he had a list of countries which they are going to collapse. America is planning on collapsing. And apparently from all those lists, all the countries that were already conquered, they were out of the way. So the only one which was left was the Soviet Union, which is the Russians.
Yeah.
And you see now how the Americans are meddling and trying to bring all the countries to side against Russia, so that at least they can take that power out of the way. Yeah. And like you were explaining it, that the more you push, the more you might find yourself that people actually are going to lose a lot of lives, because the more you push this guy into a corner, we'll realize that, okay, let me just press that button.
The cat is going to jump.
Exactly.
So what they basically say is, like, if you put a rat in the corner that much, what's the rat going to do?
It's going to eat his way out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it is always going to jump. And when it basically jumps out of that corner, then it is a sort of a survival scenario where, you put someone in the corner, that person might do something that's completely crazy, which is low key. I think it's quite important that China is not siding with everybody else, because if Russia gets to a point where it's really cornered, then something crazy might happen. You don't want anyone to be in a position where they don't have anything to lose.
That's true.
They might as well.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't negotiate with someone to the point where they don't have anything to lose. So you always want to leave that gap where there's something to lose.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is people don't get into this zone where, I mean, they might as well just I don't have anything to lose.
Yeah.
I might as well just drop the thing. And that is a problem. So it is sort of the challenge. I was listening to Eric Weinstein recently on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yes,
I don't know if you listened to it.
I did listen to it. Yeah.
So he interestingly touched, apart from his sort of mess. He's such a genius.
Yeah.
He's just such a mess whiz, like his sort of numbers and all of that. But apart from that, he also really talked about how you have Russia here, and you have Putin, and you have America on one side, and some of the times people forget something about spheres of influence. So spheres of influence is you have a family and you have a wife, and your house generally, and what's going on in that house is your sphere of influence.
Yeah.
That is your turf.
Yeah.
This is your space, right? If someone tries to get into that space, even if they are right, you're going to feel offended in a sense.
Yeah.
So when you look at Russia and Ukraine and all the other countries that are surrounding Russia in its head is saying, look, we don't really run these countries, but as a powerful nation, this is our sphere of we run this space. This is our space. So initially, the temptation was the idea was Ukraine was at some point going to join NATO. Right. NATO is Europe and America.
Yeah.
And if Ukraine joins NATO, what that means is you have NATO can have its nuclear warheads in Ukraine. Okay. What does that mean for Russia? That means you have Russia and Ukraine, they basically share a border. And your biggest enemy, someone that wants to completely destroy you if they have the opportunity to do that, now they have your neighbor as the best friend.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
A friend can be a best friend of
exactly
my enemy.
Exactly. So you basically, your neighbor is now the friend of your enemy. So what are you going to do? You're going to invade your neighbor and own the house for the neighbor of that neighbor to avoid this guy bringing his own nuclear warheads and bombs close to you.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah.
And that is what America put in to do. He's like, guys, don't get Ukraine into NATO, or don't even attempt that, because that is my neighbor.
Yeah.
If Russia says, okay, cool, we're going to get Mexico as our best friend, and we're going to put our warheads and do our training and all of that for our troops within Mexico, America is going to lose. They're going to lose it.
Yeah.
Justifiably so. I don't want my enemy to be too close to me, and that's what they did initially. And then after that, they had to invade and they had to do all that, which is all really, to a point, is sort of unjustified. It's not a great thing that Putin would do something like that. But now, America and all the great powers, they're pushing and pushing and pushing this guy to probably do something stupid. And as much as everybody else might want to, let's say, ignore that, it doesn't really affect you daily. That's true, partly. But if it really goes wrong, then things really go wrong in the world.
I've got two questions.
Yeah.
I think the first one is, when one person pushes the button, is it inevitable that the other person will also push their button?
It's a very interesting question, because it's basically, it's really a game of, that's a very good question, because it's a game of if someone does this, is the other person going to respond? So for example, if Russia today says, okay, we're going to push a nuclear thing, let's say sort of a tactical nuke, not like the big thing.
Yeah.
Something that can destroy 2 or 3 cities. Right. This is the power. What we're basically talking about is the power of these devices. What we are basically saying is you can have one device that can completely destroy South Africa as it is, the whole country. One device, not 2. The power we're talking about here is crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
When I listen to Dan Carlin talking about sort of the destroyer, of the worlds, when Einstein says a war after that will be fought with sticks and stones, What he's basically saying is it destroys civilization as we know it today. All of it. This is the biggest risk, sort of survival risk that we have at the moment. And we made it ourselves. And some of the times you think, okay, cool, when there's like we talk about, the guys in World War II after the Hiroshima, the guys would use words like Truman was the president, they would use words like Armageddon. This is the sort of the description of like Revelations to say, okay, cool, there'll be fire everywhere. To be like, this is sort of the extent of the power that this device has. Right. Okay, so let's say that doesn't happen. So let's say you have a tactical nuke and Putin drops it into Ukraine. Okay, cool. What is America going to do? Is America going to go to war, to a nuclear war, because Ukraine is destroyed? Is it worth it? All right. So there are a lot of factors. A couple of factors. The first one is basically internal politics. Let's say America would have to go to Congress. The president would have to go to Congress and say, Congress, can we declare war here? And then other countries within NATO might say, no, we're not going to do it. Right? But there might be a scenario where there are a number of things happening at the same time. Where now you have China doing something on the other side, we have Russia doing something on the other side, then it becomes an existential threat to America itself. Or someone by mistake, there were spy balloons now and all of that, so someone by mistake drops this thing.
Yeah.
Mistakenly so. They drop this thing. When they do that, then we have a problem. But the most difficult thing is the reaction time of nuclear wars is very different from what was happening in the Roman Empire. So when you started Roman wars would take months and months and months to prepare.
Okay.
People would walk for a couple of months. And people would send letters, and people would send messengers, people would send all of these things. So war will probably take 6 months before war starts. Everyone is preparing, everyone knows. Just like this game that everybody said, we're preparing for the Olympics or the World Cup.
Sure.
This reaction time here is minutes, even seconds. To say, okay, cool, there's a nuclear thing that's coming here. We need to counter that. So initially, it's not like we need to destroy them. Initially, it's basically like there's a nuclear warhead that's coming. We just need to send ours as well so that it can stop that from dropping on our land. Then that continues, that back and forth continues. But all of this is happening in minutes. The reaction time here is in minutes. So which means the president and Congress and all of that, they have to make a call like that.
And apparently these things, is it supersonic?
The speed of that is crazy. The speed of that is absolutely more than supersonic.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. So when the decision has to be made, in like period of like 5 minutes or less to basically make that call. And who is going to make a rational decision in that time? So it's very, and I'm not trying to like put like fear.
I think it's an important conversation to just archive in your mind and just leave it there, even though it feels like it's fear, but just archive it and say, okay, I don't know what's happening here, but you just keep it somewhere there, so that even when you have conversation with people, you can understand this is where we are, this is how the world is moving.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really ideas around. I mean, I don't know what you think. That's a question for you. I don't know what you think about war. Do you think war is always going to be there? What's your philosophy around war?
I've been listening to this other guy called Penwell the Black Pen. I don't know if you know him.
No.
He calls himself a god.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the guys who's. I feel like he's also influential, but I realize that there's people in our world also like consuming information, it's easy for you to get to be recommended to other podcasts, and when you find it, then you latch on.
Yeah.
Than someone who doesn't even listen to podcasts already at all. They just probably just listen to whatever where they get information. And I've been listening to this guy a lot, and he, in the context of South Africa, he says black people are not willing to fight. If you see white people, they've always taken everything from us, unapologetically so. And he's saying that we need to learn to carry guns. We need to learn to we need to learn to fight. We need to learn to be able to take things for ourselves. And that's how these world empires have built themselves. And coming back to war, what is my thinking on war is true. If you go back to how we survived back in the days, I think we once talked about hunting. The best hunter used to what? To be revered as a high status.
Yeah.
Right? So, us not being able to fight, it means that you will always be the least. You'll be a peasant in a community of people. So, in the sake, coming back to wars, I feel like war is something which it's necessary for the world that we're living in. I mean, as a child of God, obviously there's another side of it. But in the world that we're living in now, it's important for us to have wars. Because if you look at our conversation now, no way are we talking about Africa. These nuclear wars are not. We don't have those things where America would be afraid of us.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That you basically say, like, sort of part of the. I mean, and it's almost a taboo to talk about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But if you look at sort of the investment that all the powerful countries put into military, it's just astounding. We're talking about trillions of dollars that go into military budgets. Germany right now just added a couple of billions of dollars into their military budget. And talk about NATO, you talk about America, you talk about China, you talk about Russia, you talk about all these powerful countries. They've incredible amounts of budget that's going into military, into war, right? These are not very. There's definitely something to take from that. Around, there is this whole African sort of mourning. They don't look at us. They don't do this. They don't do that. They don't do all of that, which is sort of somehow justified because of what happened in history. But ultimately, there's a point where there has to be a game that's being played here. And the universe actually really doesn't care about complainers that much.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a sense of, okay, cool, this is what... It really cares about people that rise to the challenge.
Yeah.
And really start understanding how all of this works and put themselves on the map. And sort of closest that Africa got was guys like Muammar Gaddafi.
Yeah.
When they really became a sort of a rising threat to the world powers, when they said, okay, cool, look, we're going to have our own local currency, we're going to have people buying our oil in our own currency, that's when these guys became real threats. And then when that happened, what really happened? War happened in their countries, and they were taken out very quickly.
Yeah.
So ultimately, there has to be two components that come to it. So economics is the foundation of war. So economics is the foundation of war. So the rule for economics is for economics is basically whoever through war, whoever has stronger economically speaking, will win the war, right? Yeah.
I think you're touching on the second question that I had. Are Americans bullies?
I don't. I technically don't. I don't. I don't look. I don't look at the world in terms of who are bullies and who are bullies and who are not. I think a big part of it is around self-interest, right? A big part of it is around self-interest. Like America as a group of nations itself, like as the United States, as a group of states itself, there is a whole lot of self-interest that comes into play. We say we are going to fight for ourselves, and we're going to. It is sort of this whole American pride. We say we are going to sort of this sort of Trump idea, nationalistic idea, America first.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the Olympics back in the day, and Americans would win, right? And they would get there's this USA, and you just felt like there was something about us.
Camaraderie.
Yeah, exactly. There's something about us, sort of this strongly nationalistic ideal that America has. And it's not just America. So if you look at the Soviet Union too, look at Russia too, they also have that thing. We're also pushing that. He's saying he's fighting this war as a survival of the Russian people, is a survival of us, the Russians. And then the Chinese also have that whole thing with them, where they're saying, we survive as as this, and all of them are quite different in the way. So my analysis is, if you look at America, it's an idealistic country. So it's a country based on that's built based on ideas. It's not like an American blood, like the Russians. Russians is Russian blood. It's like Russian blood flows in my flows in my veins.
Yeah.
America is like, it's an idea, things like the Constitution and all of these things, human rights, peace, and all of this stuff. So it's sort of this whole idea, which makes America a bit more progressive in a sense, that it's always changing. They're always changing their position and all of that. Why? Because they sort of took their roots from the Roman Empire. So they sort of took their religion from Palestine, right? And then you basically get from actual Rome, they basically took their constitution, which is things like, how they run their politics and all of that. So they always say like they got the letter and religion. So they got their politics from there, and they got their religion from there.
Okay.
And if you look at Rome at the time, it was filled with philosophers and scientists and guys that were doing research and all of that, which were very broad. So there was a battle for ideas all the time, which was happening. So America sort of built on that concept.
Yeah.
Does that make them a bully? I don't think so. I think there's so much about influencing the world that has become such a big strategy. But there's also this whole our way is right, and it's probably the only way. And you basically push that on other nations.
Yeah.
In that part, in my opinion, that's not the right way to do things. But if you are powerful, you are tempted. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So you are tempted to sort of move in that direction where you're saying, okay, cool, our way is the only way. Like the way we do our politics, the way we do the way we define peace, the way we define human rights, that is our way, and that is the only way. So there is sort of those, so to say, these are our universal ideals, where they say these values are universal. Okay, cool. When you say you're a universal, which means you're saying anyone who is not going for these specific values, as long as they're in this universe, they are going against sort
The
of
universal, yeah.
God-given rules. That's a very dangerous stance.
And you see it with their sports. Even though it's only the Americans who are playing it, they will always call it a World Cup or
Yeah.
a World Football, whatever.
Yeah.
But we don't even know how to play hockey. We don't have snow where we are, but they call it the world. I think in a sense you're saying that Americans are bullies in a nice way.
No, I mean a big part for me is it's really been sort of studying these sort of ideas around sort of how does Africa also position itself in a sort of a different way that it can become a very sort of powerful continent in a sense. Around the world. So and there are a number of ways to look at it. There are guys that are pushing towards one Africa as a country, right? And I tell you what the challenge is with that idea. The challenge around that idea is around language. So Africa has a whole lot of different languages, and language, as much as people don't fully understand, language can be a big barrier to cooperation. So when people speak different languages, cooperation becomes extremely, extremely difficult. So if you look at the study in history, where the time in history where you see an exponential increase of things like technology and collaboration of people, and you see big nation states being formed and bigger tribes and all of that, a big part of that was can we have some language that we can share? So because language gets into culture, and culture is very important for cooperation. If I know you and me have the same roots and we have some best understanding of how things work, then it's very different. So if someone comes to you and even if you don't know them, they speak in your mother tongue, it just hits differently.
That's true.
And that's very critical for negotiation, for cooperation, all of that. So that is one limitation that Africa already has. Okay, cool. Why is it so great? The English people, when they realized that, what did they do? They spread their language around the world. If you really speak different languages, speak our language. Right. I mean, think about how many languages people have in Africa.
Yeah, and I mean, even in South Africa, we pride ourselves by saying that we have 11 official languages.
Yeah, 11 official languages. But what happens if you don't speak the other language? What language do you use?
You go to the English.
You go to English. That language is, of all the languages that are available, that's the one that you pick. Mm-hmm. The one that came from all the way far from you, but you pick that. If you're talking about power, that's where it begins. That language became sort of a centerpiece for a journey of controlling how things work in the world. So when you look at nation states like China and Russia and all of that, these guys, one thing they did was maintaining their own language. Even when they go to the UN, they address them in language. You have to translate.
Yeah.
But they address the whole thing in their own language. So language is one thing. That's a barrier. But that's not the transmash. We can use, now it's probably too late, but we have to use English now to communicate, right? But we can do that for cooperation. That's that. And then, so that's sort of the sort of key thing. And then secondly is, how do you have all these different leaders in different countries, how do you actually structure that government without stepping on other people's toes and doing all of that? It just becomes very, very tricky. So the question is there a way where you have like one African government, I think it's going to become very difficult. Is it necessary? If you don't have a single currency,
I think
it might not be necessary.
I think talking about that, right? You could you could still use one language, but in terms of trading between countries, that will be a game changer. Because right now, for you to trade with just the southern countries, it's you need a visa, you need all this other stuff just to go to your
Yeah.
neighboring country. Even in Africa, in Europe, apparently you use that one
Yeah.
passport throughout.
The European passport. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if we were to get that part right and trading and still use the same because Europe is already doing it. So we could still use the same principles that they're having to trade with other African countries. In terms of language, we can always meet somewhere English.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like the change wouldn't be that big. That's why people like Gaddafi were thinking of these ideas of making one Africa, because it has to start somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, which is the key. It is just somewhere, and the reality about it is these things can happen.
Yeah.
These things can happen. However, the way it has sort of happened in the past has been you get some I'm not saying this is the only way to do it, but you get one autocratic, very powerful leader who sort of drives that process.
Yeah.
And some of the times he has to do it by some sort of iron rule
Yeah.
to bring all of the people together, because some are going to reject that idea and some are going to accept it. But the way it has happened in history is a big part of Europe now, which is Rome and all of that stuff. This was a lot of all those different countries. They were conquered, and some of them had to submit by choice. Say, okay, cool. Look, we're not going to fight you, so we're just going to submit. And they submitted, and then it became this whole sort of positive outcome overall.
Yeah.
But there was like some sort of supreme leader that had to drive that change.
Yeah.
And the question is, is there another way to do it where it's absolute cooperation without like an iron rule guy who can say, look, guys,
to do this, yeah.
we need to do that, in a sense. So this is very interesting how the mechanics of that can happen. But I think there has to be some sort of the way it has happened in the past, some sort of autocratic drive where someone says, we're going to do this. And that person drives that. But overall, if you look at that history, because when you look at short history, you're looking at 100-year span of history, what is sort of Africa going to look like in the next 100 years, in a sense. So a big part of that, if it's one government, in some sense, someone has to have some sort of a bit of sort of autocratic drive, in a sense. But the other way to look at this is we are sort of slowly getting, which is another discussion I wanted to have with you, we're sort of slowly moving in can be sort of a dangerous space in terms of one idea of how the world looks, where you sort of have, if you and me disagree on a certain concept, then we completely become enemies. There is only one way things should go. So anyone with sort of a conflicting idea, you're definitely cancelled, and you're not allowed to talk because you have a different idea. Sort of the danger with that is that, especially with building systems like GPT-3, it's basically like that whole concept. If that system is built in sort of a unified way to say, okay, this is how things should go, then it can become dangerous, especially if a wrong idea, which can spread like a virus, sips into that system. Then everybody believes the wrong thing, and then completely, it destroys that idea of like arguments and push and pull and all of that. This is, let everybody come.
Free speech.
Yeah, free speech. Let everyone come. Let's argue about ideas. Let's disagree about things in a respectable way. But let's argue around ideas. Let's really think about how do things work. So, because of social media and what's going on, they sort of that flaw that can happen to say, people might end up thinking the same way.
I think what you're saying now is, I know that the Democrats are really pushing on this, and I think even YouTube is going on the same thing, which is basically misinformation.
Yeah,
because when you have certain ideas or when you have certain way of thinking, that's where we have things like being shadow banned, and we have things like being cancelled or basically it's being cancelled, being removed on all platforms, because what you're saying is misinformation, and we saw the rise of that with COVID-19.
Yeah,
it was the birth of misinformation, because everywhere you went, where we usually get our information, whether it be on Spotify, on Podbean, or even YouTube, because those are the main places where we get for our podcast and YouTube.
Yeah.
The moment you talk about COVID-19, you would see the World Health or the organization logo popping up there to just give you guidance. Okay, this is how you should think.
Yeah.
About COVID-19, and it gets back to what you were talking about total power, absolute power.
Corrupt. Yeah,
it absolutely corrupts.
Yeah, and if you think about COVID-19, you think about things like even the thing about, let's say, okay, masks, they stop the spread and all of that. Like we should have someone completely locked down in the house, don't go out and stuff like that, and all of that. Like a lot of the decisions were made without, it's stuff that we're starting to realize now, that a lot of the decisions were made without sort of clear data about, does it actually work, does not work.
Yeah.
The sample size was too small. In some cases, it was more like it was not like a sort of a decision that's made on actual science, but it just made on a feeling of, okay, cool, this makes sense in a sense. But most of the stuff were not sort of scientifically proven in a way. Yeah. So you really get to those, if you argue against the experts, then you're wrong.
Yeah.
Even if the experts are not showing you the actual data of why they're arguing the way they're arguing.
Sure.
So you sort of have this whole experts become authority figures, right? And if you go against these authority figures, then you're completely wrong. You have to go with these authority figures. And this whole authority bias syndrome is crazy because it's like I was reading this book, and they had like a pilot and a co-pilot in a simulation. I don't know if I told you before.
I think you was telling me about
so basically you have like a pilot and a co-pilot in there,
sure.
And they're basically in like a flight simulator, and they're sitting there, and they're basically just having a conversation. They're basically training, and then when they're training, there's a button that's there that the co-pilot knows if you press that button, you're going to crash the plane. And almost 98% of the co-pilots that were there pressed the button. And they were asked, why did you press the button when, did you know it's going to crash? Yes, I knew it was going to crash. So why did you press it? Oh, because the captain said I should press it.
Yeah.
Right. So this is sort of the danger of this sort of authority that might be experts, might become authorities on specific ideas. And when that happens, then sort of everybody just has to actually follow and believe the experts, because it's basically this idea we need to the sort of ultimate respect and ultimate honor for authorities, even when authorities
It's wrong.
are wrong.
Yeah.
And this is very dangerous. It can be very dangerous. And we need authority figures that have great ideas about how things work and all of that. Like, I love Elon, but Elon is not always right. There's some of the times where he says things that are like, no, that cannot be right. Right? Because he's a human. When you see yourself completely agreeing with what another human says, then there's something off. You're not really arguing ideas, because nobody is perfect. It's not going to say the perfect thing all the time, which means the ideas won't be perfect. But this sort of authority figure bias is very common. So you get someone, let's say, who listens to like Cardi B, and it becomes because Cardi B makes great music. Now, whatever Cardi B says about politics, Cardi B is right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
She doesn't know anything about politics. She's not a politician.
Yeah.
Right? She's not an expert on that. But it becomes one person says something. One person is basically that idol. You know, because we need gods in our life, right? Which is why people have all these celebrities. We need celebrities.
Yeah,
why?
soccer players.
Yeah, you need soccer players.
Musicians.
We need all these guys to worship. Why? It gives us a feeling that because they are like immortal figures.
Yeah.
It's like they don't die. It's like they're out of this world. It gives us a little bit more value about ourselves.
I like when you say you call them gods. Sure.
It makes us feel like maybe I'm also great. That is why we idolize other great people. It just makes you feel like maybe being human is incredible. Is
special.
absolutely is special. Maybe we are really special.
Yes, sir.
Maybe it's because the sun rotates around us.
Yes, sir.
But no, it doesn't.
Mr. Mays, talking about this idea of conversations and having people to think in one way, right? I know on our last conversation we talked about the importance of freedom.
Yeah.
Looking at where we are, I think even what you're talking about just reminding me of I don't know if it was a meme or it was just a photo you posted, the one about you are here and you see Fahrenheit and 1981.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How important is freedom in our time? In our time, like now, how important is freedom?
I think freedom is quite crucial for. So if you think about what we are trying to do in the world, right? Why?
Or maybe just before you get to that, maybe explaining what would freedom mean in our context.
Okay. Which is where I want to go to.
Okay.
So it says basically what would freedom actually mean, right? What would freedom mean? So, but I think the bigger question is what exactly are we trying to achieve, right? Is civilization, as humanity, what are we trying to do? And Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, why are we here, right? It's basically what's the meaning of life? The answer there is basically 42, right? And you're like, okay, what do you mean by 42, right? And then they sort of, he's like, the author is like, no, I mean, I just thought about a number. I didn't know. I just thought about the number. No one knows this, but we have to ask questions, right? It was a trigger for people to keep on asking better and better questions.
Yeah.
which is as we understand the world a bit more, as we understand ourselves a bit more, we start really asking better and better questions about how the universe works, which is the exploration that guys like Elon are doing, going out of space and all of that, asking better questions. We're asking now better questions about how does everything work? How does everything come together in a way? But that also means that at some point we're going to have to ask absolutely difficult questions. One. Secondly, that means we're going to disrupt the old way of thinking about how things actually work, which means we're going to tell other people that no, this way that you've been doing this, it doesn't sound right. I think you are wrong, right? But when you say to someone you are wrong, it messes up with their ego. That's what happens. And in a space where there is no freedom, but that's the only way to move forward, right? That's the only way to move. The only way to move forward is to destroy our best loved ideas, our best loved concept about how things work, ask better questions, make better decisions, and move on. That's the best way to do that.
Yeah.
But then if you're living in a world where every time you ask a question, the other person is going to tell you to shut up, but this person is, in this instance, might be more powerful than you. That means you might have a lot of questions that you have about how things should work, but then now you're not allowed to communicate all of the ideas. That means progress is stalled when there's no freedom, in this case, to communicate ideas. Even though, especially when your ideas go against the ideas of the powerful. So what you need is a world where anybody can say anything without fear of being silenced, in a way. So the people that, and if you are the powerful person, someone can say something completely against you and you won't have the right to do anything to them. And for me, that's what freedom looks like. Is it going to be create like a perfect environment? Not really. It's going to, more freedom actually means more chaos.
Yeah.
It means a bit of madness. But that madness is the method, right? They always say that there's method in the madness. Chaos is great for change. And the only way we move is basically, people call it disruption.
Yeah.
It's chaos. It seems like everything is going wrong.
Big bang.
Exactly. It's like big bang. Like
Yeah.
everything is going wrong, but there's like a method in that madness. And that's what we need. So we need a bit more chaos if we're going to move forward. We need a bit of more disruption if we're going to move forward. We need everybody to come through to, we call it the, town square. We need everybody to come through. Bring your placard, bring your whatever you bring your voice. Let's have a conversation about what, why we're here, what's the path forward, what do we need to do, and everybody has to be free to move in that direction, in a way. So freedom means I'm able to especially go against, speak something that is against the people that are powerful and without fear. So you can speak your mind without fear.
And that could be a niche.
Yeah, exactly. And does it mean some of the times you're going to insult people? Of course you're going to insult people. Does it mean that some people will take advantage of that and say, all sorts of things and all of that? Of course, that's...
Human rights.
Yeah, it's really going to happen in that sense. But people need personal freedom, which means sharing their own ideas without fear. And the other big one is basically people need financial freedom, which means a system that can create opportunities for all. Because if you actually don't have financial freedom, the way the world is set up at the moment, it's very difficult to have personal freedom.
And then on top of that, right? I think you talked about chaos, right? How would we manage the chaos of someone believing their own thing without having to it's like, is it possible for us to have people who are book lovers and book readers, like in the Fahrenheit story, right?
Yeah.
And the other people who will choose to be ignorant? Could we create societies which whoever that believes in certain ideas thrives in their ideas, and people who believe in reading books thrive in their own ideas without having to mix communities? Because at the end of the day, is when we are mixed in one community, that's where the fight, that's where you are wrong and the other one, it's like the scenario where the other one says this is a 6, the other one says no, this is a 9. So is it possible to create a world where if you want to live a digital free world, go stay there. If you want to live in a place where you'll be interacting with robots and some of us were cyborgs and all those free ideas, you do it in your own place.
Yeah, so I'm basically reading a book. I'll see if I can get a cut from that book quickly. So it's basically one book I'm reading now. It's very fascinating because it basically talks a lot about sort of, what do we do when we get into conflict of, how do we resolve a conflict of ideas? And a big part of life is conflict resolution.
Okay.
And conflict resolution, some of the times is within ourselves, and some of the times is within sort of the set of relationships that we have. And a big part of that is just sort of let me see if I can pull it.
Okay.
If I can pull it up. So the book is basically called Against Method.
Against Method. Okay.
Against Method: Outline of an Anarchist Theory of Knowledge.
Okay.
So it's a very sort of a very provocative book. Let me see if I can. Yeah. Okay. So he basically says. Experts and laymen, professionals and dilettanti, truth freakers and liars, they are all invited to participate in the contest and to make their contribution to the enrichment of our culture. The task of the scientist, however, is no longer to search for the truth or to praise God or to systematize observations or to improve predictions. These are but side effects of an activity to which his attention is now mainly directed, and which is to make the weaker case the stronger, as the sophists say, and thereby to sustain the motion of the whole. So generally, what he's basically saying is, what normally would happen is when someone comes up with a crazy idea, generally people say, shut up. I mean, why is it embarrassing us now?
Yeah.
Why is it embarrassing us now?
It's the matrix.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you should basically, I mean, he's talking too loud, man, but he's talking nonsense. The right way to approach that is, this man has an idea, he seems quite passionate about this idea. How do we improve it? How do we improve his idea? Let's not shut it down. How do we improve his idea? How do we take him where he is and grow that idea into an idea that we can work with? Some of the times it might just is communicating it incorrectly.
Okay.
It might not be completely wrong until we actually prove that it's wrong. And most ideas are not absolutely wrong. Most ideas are incorrect within a specific context. Within a specific context. Right?
Yeah.
That's why you have Newtonian mechanics. It's true up to a certain point. Then in quantum physics, when you get to very, very smaller units, it becomes true in the Newtonian mechanics is no longer true. So with bigger masses, Newtonian mechanics is great.
Yeah.
But once you get to very, very smaller masses, the maths don't check out.
Yeah.
So do you say Newtonian mechanics is completely wrong because it doesn't work with smaller units? No, it is right, but in a specific context. So most ideas are like that.
Okay.
Most ideas are incorrect in a specific context, but let's not shut them down. So he basically says, it's like, the sort of attention of the scientists now, which is anyone who's trying to, understand how the world works, is to make the weaker case the stronger. So take a weak case, take that weak idea, and find ways to basically improve that idea. That is sort of the task of a scientist, and that is the task of the human seeker, so to say, like a seeker of knowledge. So that's one part of it. So let's not shut the other person down. Let's try to hear everybody, and the second thing is let's have a method to grow ideas.
Yeah.
Let's have a method of improving ideas.
Yeah.
And the method of improving ideas hasn't changed since long back. We need to get some empirical evidence of your idea. So we need to test it with the real world in different environments. And then if we can test those ideas consistently, then we sort of reach not what they call the truth, but we reach a state where it's an idea that can work.
Universal.
Not completely universal. So it's very, when people talk about sort of universal concepts, generally I think it's basically people being too proud when they call things universal, in a sense, because there are things that nothing is completely universal. There's always some sort of context. There's always some...
way it applies to for certain people.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you were saying, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's always some context around it. There's always some, variables around it that when you sort of come outside those limitations, generally it doesn't hold. So in physics, you'd see what they call constants. These numbers that they plug into the equations to make the equations work.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
The reason why they do that is because it's not a universal law.
I'm saying that I saw a meme where they were saying that what does K stand for? And you ask different people in different spheres. The one is talking thermo, whatever. The one is talking about like K. The constant is different for
different environments.
different environments. Yes,
exactly. And that's like all things really. So which means it's not like completely universal. It's like what context are you talking about?
Yeah.
But we need to find a way to sort of prove those ideas within a specific context. I was watching Chris Rock new Netflix special.
Okay.
It's fantastic.
I'll check it out.
You're talking about being
Is it the one where he talks about his family?
No. This is the new. I think
The latest one. Okay.
Yeah, the latest one. Yeah.
Okay.
So he probably. I mean, he addressed the whole slap.
Oh, I think I saw something like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he basically addressed he addressed the whole slap. I mean, he talked about a whole lot of things. But he talked about the slap that he sort of. He grew up, admiring this guy Will Smith, and it's like one of the guys that were close to him. And then after that, he basically. It's called something outrage, but it's basically misguided outrage.
Okay.
Where everybody else he got into like an entanglement with the wife was in an entanglement, and they were sort of dating different people and stuff like that, and everybody was sort of calling out his wife, and then of all the people that called out on his wife, he was the one that got clapped.
Got the punishment.
Exactly. So they're talking about that as sort of misguided, misguided outrage. But he talks about that. But then he also talks about something I found quite interesting about abortion. So he basically talks about abortion. It's like, oh, cool. What does it mean? These are real life ideas, right?
Sure.
That there's someone that says, okay, cool.
It's pro-life.
A pro-life or pro-choice.
Yeah.
Right? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You are pro-choice. Oh, so you kill babies. Right? Oh, you are pro-life. Life. Oh, so you don't want women to have the rights over their bodies. Right?
Yeah.
So generally, people deal with these edge so we call them edge cases, right? It's on the edge. It's either you're a baby killer or you are fighting against
oppressor.
You're an oppressor of women.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, cool. But there are so many nuances in the middle. There are different contexts in the middle.
There's many contexts. Yeah, because I like that. There's so many I think the way you answered it is so cool. Wow. Yeah.
There's so many things happening here.
Yes.
In the middle.
Yes.
Right? Well, the other question comes in. Okay, cool. So, okay, cool. If you're pro-choice, you're a baby killer, right? But at what point do you like say, I'm not going to kill the baby, right? Is it at the first trimester, or is it when the baby is 4 years old?
Oh yes, it's so true. Like there's so many things in between. In between, I think it's coming back to the question that I asked, that with the ideas, can we have maybe two different worlds or whatever?
I mean, unfortunately, I think one of the things that I've been really thinking about now is sort of how do you deal with ideas when they basically come into conflict, right? So you have two ideas that are very strong, and at some point they come into conflict. How do you sort of deal with it? And a big part of that is, we need to discuss alternative ideas.
Okay.
Because life is not black or white. It's not black or white. It's not either or. There are a lot of factors that are, there's so much that's happening here. So when you talk about, now are you pro-choice or pro-life? That's a very, we're not asking the right questions. The questions are a bit more deeper than that, because there is a context that's really happening. That, okay, cool, you're in a situation where the mother and the baby both are going to die because it's so risky. What should the doctor do? What's the decision made here? The life is, the doctor can say, okay, cool, absolutely, there's 98% risk that the mother and the baby are going to die if this pregnancy is kept. What do you do in that case? Are you pro-life or pro-choice? That's the wrong question to ask. What is the context?
Yeah.
So there has to be a discussion about all these sort of nuances in terms of what's really going on.
Yeah.
That each and every question doesn't have an answer A or B. Depending on the context, the answer can be C, or can be D, or can be E. What we need is a discussion around more alternatives. It's not like you're on the left or you're on the right. The idea has to be, what is the context? What is the context? So there has to be like a whole lot of discussion around what the context actually looks like.
You're making it difficult for my next question. You're making it so difficult because after exhausting these ideas about freedom and what is freedom, ideas and improving of ideas and polarity in ideas, because I wanted to move to, I think we should still move to that, which is beyond freedom. You should now start talking about truth.
Yeah.
Right? Because truth is, I would like to believe truth does not have context. Truth is truth wherever you are.
Yeah. So I mean, it is very interesting to think. Okay, cool. There's basically what you call truth, which is like sort of undeniable facts, so to speak. For example, there are absolute truths in terms of what actually happened, right? History, like what really happened.
Yeah.
But then you look at how history is presented, right? You look at how history is presented.
Sure.
If you look at what actually happened and how the history is taught, then you realize That's not what really happened. It depends who is saying it, right? Who is saying it? Like I was listening, for example, like guys like Elon, and you speak about Tesla, right? And say, okay, cool. You know, the mission for Tesla is this. When we started Tesla, this was the mission. We're trying to, alternative energy and stuff like this is what we're trying to do. And you can tell that is a modified answer. What actually happened when the company was started is completely different from how the story is being told.
Yeah.
But it's because generally history is when it's spoken in a certain context to highlight specific points of interest that make sense with the present status, with the status of what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So we are looking at the past with the eyes of the present. If the present is different, the story about what actually happened will be completely different. So how do you look at history? It becomes human beings. That's the tricky part about human beings. They're very good at storytelling. So even events that happened in the past, normally people see things that actually never happened. And some people start telling stories of something that never happened, but when it happened, this is what they saw.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the moon landing.
Right. So
Yeah.
it says basically so do you actually say this was like sort of the facts of the scenario? It's quite tricky, to think what actually happened. So, but they are there's what you call truths, which are sort of ideas that are repeatable. Like in science, you basically talk about repeatable, that are basically repeatable, that if you use these rules, they'll work. For example, if you launch a rocket, there are rules of physics that actually work.
Yeah.
We basically call them, the first principles of physics. So there are first principles. These are sort of fundamentals that we can build on that actually work. And you can try it in different conditions, in different aspects. You can tweak context and all of that, but it is almost universal that it basically works. But it has also be understood in a specific context, right? There is gravity on Earth. There's also gravity on the moon, but the constants, they change.
The pool is not the same.
Exactly, the pool is not the same.
Yeah.
Right, the constants change. So if someone tells you this number 9.81 is the law, then you're like, not really. It depends what context you're talking about. So it's just unfortunate that what people call truth, some people want it to be truth as in this is it and there's nothing other. And no one wants to have a question. No one wants to have a discussion around in what context are you having this discussion.
Yes.
So there always has to be some sort of context that we discuss things in, because when we miss context, then what you say truth doesn't some of the times become distorted because of what people are trying to achieve and stuff like that and all of that, in a sense. I mean, I don't know, what would you call truth? That's actually this.
Yeah, I think the way you're answering it is, it makes it fair for the conversation that we are having, which is in a world where there are many ideas and where people think differently. What you can call truth, someone can, because I think the moment for me, truth will have to come in a sense of spiritual. What's the word? Spiritual information, maybe, for lack of a better word, right?
Yeah.
That, let's say, for example, truth would be there is one God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And someone will say that, no, there are many gods, right?
Yeah.
And the challenging thing is, in a sense, you're also opening my mind that that truth, it makes sense for me as a child of God.
Yeah.
In a Christian sense.
In that context.
Context,
right?
yes.
In that context, that that basically absolutely makes sense, right? But in someone else's context, it might actually not.
It might not fly.
It basically might not, it might not add up.
Yeah.
Right? In someone's code, it might not add up. But then people start having the conversation around, okay, cool. When you say there's one God, okay, cool. What exactly do you mean? What's your definition of God? Who is this God? And stuff like that. And then you start running into conflicts again. That someone who is Christian and someone is Muslim, and the Muslim person is saying, okay, cool. The definition of your God, according to my prophet, is different from the definition of your God according to your prophet. Okay, cool. Let's have a discussion. And then generally, those discussions get into a deadlock.
Yeah.
Because you cannot have empirical evidence to that.
Yeah. And
it becomes difficult to test.
And I think we might have touched on this, that
every
religion presents itself as the truth. It can't be a religion if it doesn't present itself as the truth.
Yeah.
So, I guess in a sense, you just answered my question.
Because generally in those discussions, you sort of get into deadlock, right? To say, okay, cool. So, okay, cool. How do we prove it? Then generally people will get in deadlock instead of those conversations, because someone says, okay, cool, I believe that. Well, what does it mean, I believe? This is my subjective truth. This is my truth. That Jesus is my Lord and Savior. That's my truth.
Yeah.
No one can come and tell you that that's not your truth. I mean, this is my subjective. I'm telling you, that's my truth.
Yeah.
Right? And the other person can say, okay, cool. Muhammad or whoever this is the guy. That is my truth.
Lord and Savior.
All right?
Sure.
So it is nothing to do with, if you come and say, okay, cool, this table here is not solid, then we can have an actual argument. So why are you saying this not solid? Okay, there's pause and stuff like that and blah, 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 blah. But how do you define solid? Can you put something on it? Can it support a different weight and stuff like that? Is that how you define that? How are the particles arranged? Is that how you define? We can have an argument and actually get to some sort of conclusion on what this is all about.
Does that make truth, which is metaphysical, difficult to let's say advocate or preach about?
Yeah. So anything metaphysical becomes quite tricky, and in most cases dangerous. In most cases, extremely dangerous. So the way you look at, if you study a whole lot of different cults, they have a whole lot of like a story that's behind that, and a promise attached to a promise attached to that, in a sense. So one lady, she basically started a cult back in the day, and she said, okay, cool, the world is basically ending on this day, and then everybody should sell your possessions and quit your job and stuff like that. Let's go to one place where we wait. The guys waited for like a couple of weeks. We'll wait because it's about to end. So people quit their jobs, people sold their houses and their possessions, and then they gave away the money and they went there to wait on there. Nothing came. Nobody showed up.
Yeah.
And you would think people after that would say, you lied to us. The lady apparently she stood up and she said, look, it is because of us and our commitment that the whole world was saved today.
Yeah.
And the following even grew.
Yeah.
Right? But it's mainly because we cannot have empirical evidence around what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There had to be some agreement to say, okay, if this doesn't happen, let's use this as proof to say what you're talking about is nonsense. It's not actually the reality.
Yeah.
But every time you get into that place of dogma and stories, it just becomes very tricky, because a lot of the people get, especially like deep cults, a lot of people get into this whole rabbit hole where it's just it's a slippery slope. You get in there, there's definitely no coming back.
Yeah.
And that's very, it can be completely dangerous in a sense. So deep ideology can always be deep ideology that you cannot justifiably prove. It can be dangerous in a way. Is it helpful in some way? Of course, it's helpful. That's how you build community. That's how you get people to cooperate on things and all of that. So you don't shut it down. One thing the Roman Empire did well was, on one end, they had the philosophers, and then you had the sort of religious scholars on one side, and then you have sort of you basically have the politicians on one side. And there's like an interesting quote. I'd like to read that one as well.
Sure.
Which is basically quite fascinating, because if you think about it, you think about all these things as like completely distant.
Yeah.
You have the priest, and then you have the king, and you have the merchant. So the business guy, you have the politics guy, and then you have sort of the philosopher is sort of slash the priest.
Yeah.
It's basically the guy that has some sort of strong ideology.
Ideas, yeah.
And generally, the politician doesn't shut those.
Is it from the same book?
So this one is from the decline and fall of the. It's basically from the decline and the fall of the Roman Empire.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let me see if I can get it here.
The decline and the fall of the Roman Empire.
Yeah. It's like 7 volumes. It's a very sort of a very long. It's a sort of very long book. Yeah, but so it basically says the policy of the emperors and the Senate, as far as it concerned religion, was happily seconded by the reflections of the enlightened and by the habits of the superstitious part of their subjects. The various modes of worship which prevailed in the Roman world were all considered by the people as equally true. So they're like different types of worshipping that was happening, but they were basically considered as equally true.
True, yeah.
By the philosophers, as equally false. So you basically have like generally considered as equally true, right? Mm-hmm. But the philosophers would say, all of you guys are arguing about different things. All of you are wrong, right? Mm. And by the magistrate, it's equally useful. These are people that had the power. So the politicians looked at this. They didn't shut anybody down. All of you guys, when it comes to it, you're going to vote. So it's equally useful. So religion was, in that case, a very powerful tool that these politicians would use to basically control the masses.
Sure.
And thus toleration produced not only mutual indulgence, but even religious concord. So you basically have all these different religious.
Please say the last statement. What did you say?
So he basically says
not mutual indulgence.
And thus toleration produced not only mutual indulgence, but even religious concord. So people started coming together and say, okay, cool, we might be worshipping differently, but we're all sort of one kind. Yeah. And the politicians did not shut anybody down because it was useful to get the voters in and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And if you look at this model, that's sort of the American model.
I guess it's universal.
Yeah, it's not
unless if you're in countries where you only vote for one guy all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically getting so universal that
and that's a description of democracy in a sense.
Yeah. So and this was hundreds of years ago.
Yeah. This is just a segue a bit. Did the Roman Empire fall off just after the death of Jesus Christ, or it took some time before that?
No, it took some time. So it was basically So how it basically fell was sort of a whole lot of different factors. But there were also some sort of values that were lost in that process. Talking about the sort of mainly the fun enough the sort of weakness of the leaders. There was this idea of like you have a firm ruler, so someone who is there with sort of an iron rule.
Yeah.
This person runs the show. The army is strong. They also let people like really worship how they want, as long as you pay your taxes and you do all of that. And they had all these games, which are happening, but you didn't get to do really what you wanted to do all the time.
Yeah.
So there was sort of this, you needed a leader that was really good at controlling how people actually do what they do, in a sense. So that sort of lagged over time is one area. Then the other area that sort of lagged as well was it was sort of a military state. So you definitely had like a powerful military. And there are a couple of things, like factors that I just thought I need to talk to you about that today.
Sure.
Because just sort of studying the Roman Empire, there was basically something about it.
Yeah.
So the first part was basically the myth. They call it the myth. So they had like the way to control large masses of people is you need to create a story that we can all rally behind. Whether that story is true or not true, that actually doesn't matter.
Is that the part about the meaning of life is 42?
Yeah. So we basically need like a story that we all can follow.
Yeah.
If it's in politics, it can be in a sort of a nationalistic story where we all have, American blood, and this is what this means. And it becomes so strong in us that, that story, we believe this story so much. And you want a story that is a myth because you don't want people to prove that story wrong.
Oh, I see.
So you need stories that you cannot prove to get a whole lot of masses behind you.
So it has to be metaphysical.
It has to be metaphysical.
Okay. Okay, it's fine.
So it has to be metaphysical.
Yeah.
You're going to need like something that's sort of almost a metaphysical, something that's almost untouchable. And if you think about even people that build, companies that get close to like cars, like today you might think of companies like Tesla or Apple and all these companies. There's sort of a story in that company that is something about. I was just impressed with the Tesla Investor Day this week.
Yeah.
And just listening to it is like, we are talking about the world. It seems as if it's a story from the Bible. We're talking about a world where, everybody can have all the energy and everybody can have. It's almost sort of utopia.
Yeah.
We're going to build a city on Mars and all of that. It's a big dream. It's a big vision. It almost feels like this big picture that we're going towards somewhere.
So creating a heaven of some sort.
Yeah, creating a heaven of some sort, in a sense. So they also had that, where they had like a myth. The second thing they had was generally, incentives. Right? So you need some incentive. You will need an incentive mechanism where you say, okay, cool, look, we're going to have a way to incentivize someone. We're going to reward you with this. And incentives are one of the biggest motivators of human behavior. So if someone is expecting to get something, it can be a social incentive. You're going to be well accepted. It can be attention incentive. You're going to have all the attention. Or you're going to have monetary, financial incentive.
Yeah.
And people would do really great things just for the incentive which they get. Yeah. What's in it for me? What's in it for me? So they get like a bag of cash, or a bag of silver, and all of that. That was a big motivation. Your family will be taken care of if you kill yourself. This happens.
That's the Islam.
Yeah. It basically happens. If you go die, your family will be taken care of.
7 virgins when you get
exactly. Yeah. And then discipline. So there's a statement here, and yet so sensible were the Romans of the imperfection of valor without skill and practice, that in their language the name of an army was borrowed from the word which signified exercise. So discipline was a key thing for them.
Okay.
Waking up, doing the same thing, doing the drills, doing all of that. There was sort of an idea about developing skill and expertise.
And I guess that speaks to camaraderie, and
Exactly.
the camaraderie brings family, a sphere of some sort that makes you feel like you belong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just the idea of like, they realized the power of repeating something consistently and developing skill and expertise.
Yeah.
That you had the best philosophers and yet you're the greatest warriors. And being a warrior just didn't mean that, you just want to go and fight and run. It means you trained. You put some time, some effort into this. You want to develop the skill of war, strategy, and all of these things. They had all these things all sorted out. Your height, 100% height, the way you hold the shield, the way you run, the way you do all of that. So it's skill and sort of practice was a big thing, which is sort of the discipline.
In a sense, it makes them be able to fight wars.
Yeah.
And if there's a country which is not bending their knee, they send their disciplined warriors.
Yeah.
And that speaks because everyone wants to achieve something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's basically that, and then there's diligence, and then they had a strong law and stuff like that, all of that. But it's sort of, if you look at how that army was structured, there's discipline, there's a myth, there's basically a story, there's sort of this whole thing, incentive that's really going on. That's sort of how you get because one of the things I've been thinking, how do you get masses of people, these hundreds of thousands of people, to dedicate their life for a nation? A nation is sort of a mythical figure. It actually doesn't really mean much. A nation is basically like, I am South African, or I'm Zimbabwean, or I'm this. What that means is very minimal to how you actually live your daily life.
Yeah.
In your daily life, you have a wife and you have some kids, and that's all you care about. You need to eat. These are very fundamental things that you need to do. But when someone says, you are going to go to war and you're most likely going to die, and you're dying because you're fighting for your country.
So which means your children.
I'm a blood of the soil, stuff like that, all of these things, right? How do you get people to basically do all of these radical things, in a sense? And a big part of this are the factors that, were sort of in the Roman Empire that sort of got lost. That sort of got lost over time. And when that happened, it's sort of a decline that everybody was denying that there is a decline. And this happens in companies. This happens in families, and this happens in any sort of organization where a big part of is denial that this is now going down. And it seems as if, okay, cool, everybody knows there's a problem here, it's not going down, and no one actually faces up to the problem to say, okay, cool, let's find a way to actually fix it. Like, if things don't get improved, things don't happen.
Yeah.
So they don't, it just doesn't do itself. There has to be like some human agency to basically someone getting on there and doing, and doing stuff.
I like that. And I like how that those things, the decline of it, and that pride that creeps in to the power that you had, and it's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
For everyone, because when South Africa is now greylisted, and a country which was like the sweetheart of Africa,
Yeah.
it becomes so hard for us as citizens to think, I was still going to be great, and we continue to have things like load shedding, and you hear the new sweetheart of Africa, which is Rwanda,
yeah.
that they have a belief of some sort, depending on what they believe in and all those stuff. It's so intriguing when you're like placing it down that belief can literally just go away and no one ever actually fights for this idea or the myth, because that's the first thing that you actually talked about.
Yeah.
South Africa is the darling of Africa.
You need this story, and that's why you need great leaders. So great leaders are which are myths are not bad, are not bad in themselves.
Yeah.
You need great leaders who are charismatic. They are great because they create a story for us.
Sure.
And something to basically fight and live towards.
Yeah.
And that's good because human beings are storytellers, and we listen to stories, and stories motivate us, and stories are great for us in a sense. Yeah. So we need these stories, and we need great leaders that can sell a great story. We need champions.
Yeah.
We need champions. But also we need very practical people that can get on there and say, okay, cool, we're going to be very practical about how we do what we do and what steps we're going to take, in a sense. I mean, you look at what's happening with ESCOM. I don't know if you listen to the interview of the CEO that's the CEO that's living.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know what his motives are in saying everything he said, but he was mostly right. It is things that everybody knew, that you get all of these, sort of gatekeepers.
Yeah.
And this is sort of being run like a mafia, and it happens not just in South Africa. It happens it happens in every country.
Yeah.
And it happens everywhere. The only problem is that if we don't have sort of a higher way of operating, such that all these people, we can have a system.
Filters down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have a system that sort of filters the impact of decisions that are made at those levels, in a sense. And ultimately, you get them. And my other friend was telling me that he went to another African country, and they were having a discussion with they're basically having a discussion with basically one of the politicians there, and he basically said, look, you're saying, look, you basically give us the money. We're also going to give you something, but I promise you, when you come back, there'll be a bridge here, right? And you took the money. You also gave the other guy some money as well, but you actually built the bridge, right? And the most difficulty is with the level of corruption that sort of happens in this country at the moment is bridges are not built. All the money is basically taken, and there's no bridge left.
Sure.
At least build a bridge.
Yeah. And sometimes is, even if it's built, the quality is
the quality is not great.
Yeah.
So there has to be no compromise on actual delivery of services, and that has to be instilled within the culture. That has to be instilled with sort of within the leadership. Like the whole idea of load shedding, it's not a very difficult idea to. It's not a very difficult problem to basically solve. What I think, talking about sort of a medium to long term horizon, which is one thing that I'm basically working on now, which I think is quite key, is how do you allow everybody to be a producer and consumer of electricity? So you basically have what we call prosumers. Okay. So you're producing electricity on one side, you're also a consumer on the other side. So you basically have like
give and take.
Give and take. So you have an incentive to sort of maintain your solar panel and your battery pack, and then you do peer-to-peer energy trading. So whenever you produce electricity, you can sort of trade with your neighbor, with your next door neighbor. Yeah. And you are not selling back to the grid as in selling to ESCOM. You can actually sell directly to a certain consumer within that network. So at the moment, ESCOM is looking at themselves as a company that sells the product, which is electricity. So instead of doing that, let ESCOM be managing the grid. Let them just manage the grid. only. So just manage the grid. Once you manage the grid, make sure the grid is perfect. And then you have another top layer of consumers with a simple application that you get there. You can sell electricity. You know how much electricity you have, how much electricity you're going to use, and then you can sell electricity. You can make money off that. So you look at your solar panel and all of that as an investment for you. And on every transaction that is basically done on this network, Eskom will get a piece of that. So Eskom would look at themselves as sort of the Amazon of electricity.
Yeah.
You manage the infrastructure, you manage the platform, and then everybody else treads on. Everybody else treads on that platform.
Sounds like Uber.
Exactly. And what happens on there is the cost of energy, which is part of, I think, my mission at the moment, is how do you basically reduce the cost of energy to almost zero? And the next $1 trillion business that are going to be built are businesses that are centered around energy and information. Which is basically how do you reduce the cost of access to energy to almost zero? So if you have a big market, most of the wars that are happening right now is because of energy.
No.
Most of the wars that are happening right
oils,
now
true.
is because of energy.
So true, yeah.
So you're basically talking about because you need energy to grow food. You need energy to have water. Energy is extremely central. You need energy to drive cars. You need energy for heating and cooling. You need energy to run industries, run manufacturing, and all of that. So if the cost of energy goes all the way down to zero, to almost zero, then you reduce conflict in the world.
Yeah.
That's one thing. But also, you have a lot of billion-dollar companies at the moment that are in petroleum and all these energy industries, fossil fuels, that we know is going to die at some point. But there's so much cash that they have. So all that investment, which is in petroleum at the moment, is going to move towards sustainable energy. It's going to move in that direction. So there's going to be so much investment in alternative energy, sustainable energy in the next, let's say, 50 years or so, that is going to become an absolutely big and great industry.
Yeah.
So the guys that are going to work in that industry, the guys that are going to start business in that industry, are going to make billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So that's the cost of energy. And the second thing is the cost of access to information, which is the guys like GPT-3 and OpenAI, what they're doing now. They're sort of opening a bigger gate to how do you actually access information.
Yeah.
So they're reducing the cost of access to information to almost zero. And there's no doubt why this company is now valued at $19 billion, a company that just got launched as a public, sort of a for-profit company recently.
Yeah.
But because the cost of information is very critical for lining productivity and everything that's going on, and you have the cost of energy on one side. So these are sort of industries that almost anyone can bet on in the next 50 years. So if anyone wants to build $1 billion business, so you're an entrepreneur or you're doing something that's, or you don't know what to do, if you focus on these two industries, you're most likely going to win. And the other industry is basically a small section just called AI. If you just do something in AI, most likely you're going to make a lot of money and you have greater impact.
Yeah.
So it's quite exciting. I've been thinking about this quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I think the answer to the energy problem is almost clear. The answer to the information problem, guys like GPT-3, guys like OpenAI with GPT, and large language models and all of that. There's so much happening there that's super exciting.
Yeah. There was the other one that I sent to you. I mean, AI is I think maybe that will be the next conversation that we're gonna have.
Yeah.
But AI is literally reshaping and retelling how we interact with information and how we consume information, because from literally what we have called talent, AI is doing it in seconds. There are songs which are being written by those machines.
Yeah.
Where you can just type, I need an album, made by Kanye West
Yeah.
and Kurt Franklin.
Yeah.
And it does the art cover and tells you the title of the album. And it gives you a 7-track songs.
Yeah.
And when you listen to it, because it has all this archive of how Kanye or Kurt Franklin sings.
Yeah.
And all that can just be done by a simple type, where you just type Kurt Franklin and whoever.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a time where Obama was a bit scared about this, talking about, there was a time where he was talking about how the facial what do you call it?
Deepfakes.
Deepfake stuff.
Yeah.
And right now, deepfake is, it's nothing. I don't know if maybe they were using AI engines or whatever, but that's something that's already happening now. AI, it's already, it's able to take my voice and I just write a script and it speak exactly like me.
Yeah.
All my pauses, all my gestures,
Everything.
it takes everything. And there was a thing that happened with Kanye West saying that he's moving to South Africa, and everyone was so excited. And unfortunately, that was just someone who used an audio clip just went out, but it turned out that that was actually an AI product.
Yeah.
And I guess that will be our next conversation.
Yeah. So the implications that I will just say quickly, like the implications of that, we have never been here before.
I like it when you say it.
We've never been here before.
Yeah.
Life is going to be different. AI is like the invention of electricity. And no one knew what the implications would be when electricity is invented.
Yeah.
Lighting, heating,
Semiconductors,
cooling, powering all our devices, all of that. When
preservation.
When that happened, no one knew what the impact of this was going to be. But this is one of sort of the greatest inventions now that we have in human history. Yeah. We are absolutely creating intelligence. And it is something to learn about. It's something to understand. Whatever I do, how can I use AI to basically improve what I do?
Yeah.
How can I basically work with AI to make what I do even better? And that's the question for everybody.
Yeah.
Like the engineers that are not going to understand AI are going to be useless in the future.
That's true.
The artists or singers that are not going to use AI are not going to be useful in the future. So almost any industry now we have this sort of big brother. It's like a force that's getting into every industry, and it really becomes the new electricity that powers whatever
society,
we do.
Yeah.
So AI is basically that. Is that a risk? Not really. I think life is just going to look very different. And is it a good thing? I think it is a great thing. Can it destroy us?
Absolutely.
There's also great potential for that. Any great tool that comes in can have such powerful ways to basically destroy us. But just AI is just something completely different. You've never been here before. When we get to artificial general intelligence, it's just going to be completely different. I think we're going to be quite small for AI to even bother destroying us. I think humans don't go around trying to kill dogs and cats and all of that. They're just too small for them. So AI, I think, is going to look at us in that way, because human beings are great at doing great stuff, but also make very, very crazy.
So we're like species that make dog tricks for AI.
Exactly. Right?
Sure.
Sort of. We can be that, but I think sort of one sort of hopeful hopeful message is around sort of the kind of tools that we have at the moment. We can quickly understand what's going on in the world, and we can make great decisions. And I think stuff that you're doing with the podcast, and getting this sort of these conversations going is it's a great way to move society forward in a sense. I mean, one thing I can encourage you to do is to sort of have more have more ideas that are very strong being shared and being communicated. Let people think different. Let people change their ideas about how they see the world, sort of by just listening, or let them at least ask sort of some better questions as well. So I think that's I think you're doing well, and I'm definitely excited to be here. I'm moving to Pretoria now, but I can fly over there. Then we can do like a podcast in Pretoria. Yes. But it's great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you very much for those kind words. I think maybe there's a reason why probably I wanted to do a reflection of some sort on the podcast that we. I remember I always tell the people this story, and someone always asks me why did you start a podcast, and I was like, guys, I used to be on these long calls with my mentor, and it was so long that at the time we would always say that, oh no man, we should actually start a podcast. Even in the time, every time we maybe schedule a call, we would always call it a podcast. Because our calls would literally be something like what we just had now. Discussions of ideas and how the world is working, and trying to see it from different perspectives. And in a sense, that has given me purpose. And thank you so much for that. Someone calls me a podcaster today. Because I just decided to yield to when you said, because I mean, in a sense, sometimes people don't understand the importance of mentors. Of someone who you hold them in high regard. Just for you to say that, no, start a podcast. I mean, you funded it. Thank you so much. And that, in a sense, has made me have a voice, has made me, in a sense, have some form of purpose. And it becomes a label that people call me with, that he's a podcaster. And before, you couldn't even be called an engineer, even though you're an engineer. But the moment you get someone who puts you into a podcast and doing something, when you start doing something, like people start recognizing you. And I think this conversation is leading to this was my final question. Maybe just to round up what we're talking about. And maybe just before I get to the question is, thank you very much, Mr. Mays, for continuing to listen. I think you're a very good listener, and the way you nudge me into facing the world, it makes me, you always say that be open-minded, and like what you said now, that bring different conversations. That way, in a sense, we are educating as many people as possible. But thank you very much, sir.
It's just a pleasure. I think, with the calls that we had and just sort of having these conversations, it also like, a lot of times it definitely helps me. Definitely helps me think, as well. I have one guy that he's here in Cape Town that I wanted to have a conversation with.
Sure.
Great young man as well. We normally would, like, on lunchtime, would take walks and just talk.
Yeah.
Just take walks and just talk. He's asking questions. I'm asking questions. We're literally talking about every topic, and no topic is off limit. And I've learned so much from him. Like I've learned so much from you. I've sort of watched him play. So I definitely want you to have him on the podcast.
That'll be
You know,
great, yeah.
great guy. He also really enjoys podcasts and listening to different conversations. So I think it is fascinating because conversation is. We're talking about language right now, and our language is sort of this communication is sort of the beginning of things around cooperation, playing around with ideas, societal change, and just getting people to think very differently about a whole lot of different things. It reduces conflict, probably brings freedom to different people, and just sort of basic knowledge, and just sort of really understanding how things, what's actually going on in the world. I think it's fascinating. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I would really love to have the gentleman to come through and we just talk and that's one thing that I would want to have people who talk ideas, and it's just a conversation where we just talk ideas, and it allows us to see where we are in the world.
Yeah.
And we participate accordingly.
Yeah.
There's one thing that you said on our previous podcast, that the way you make a change or your mark here on earth is by contributing to the problems of that time.
Yeah.
So if you're out of touch of what is happening in this time, you'll be an extra.
Yeah, you basically an extra. Which
You'll
is
be an
just something
extra
to
in the
avoid.
movie, yes.
Yeah.
And in a sense, I don't want to make it feel like you're answering the question that I want to ask.
Yeah.
The question that I want to ask is, how does a young person or a young person or who's out there and say that I don't have an idea of what to make of my life, how does that person maximize the value that they already have? Because everyone has value.
Yeah.
But how do they really maximize their value so that they can have that impact in our society?
I think it's basically a couple of things. So they I would say the first thing, it sounds like a cliche in a sense to say, be curious about how the world works. Always have like a childlike curiosity. We can change this. We can move forward. Be curious about how the world works. That's sort of the beginning of great change. Be curious about ideas. If you can read a lot of books or listen to a whole lot of podcasts, and listen to a whole lot of different people who do different things, but just be curious about how the world works. The second thing is sort of live by sort of multidisciplinary approach to life. So you want to really understand overall what's going on. And when you say what's going on, it's basically understanding things around economics, right? What's going on in the economics world. Read a book about economics 101. You don't need to go past that. That's literally all you need. Read physics 101. Read chemistry 101. Read psychology 101. Read just be as broad as possible. Look at all the big disciplines that are there. Be as broad as possible. Read or listen to something the way whichever way you learn. YouTube is basically the best way to learn, but depending on what you want to do, but you want to be as broad as possible. Then thirdly, you want to build financial freedom. I cannot overemphasize that aspect. You want to build financial freedom. So you really want to, because financial freedom is almost extremely crucial for whatever you're going to achieve in life. Generally, people don't listen to voices of people that have no sort of financial value in the world. It's just unfortunate that's how the world is set up, but that's what normally happens. So you focus on being, or being financially free, and being financially free generally it means you need to hop onto, fastly moving waves in the world. For example, now we're talking about energy, we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about all these sort of ideas that are moving at a fast pace. So you want to be part of a growth industry. You sort of want to do something within the growth, the sort of industries that are growing at that pace. And that actually means you're going to have to learn a whole lot of things very quickly. And that means you're going to have to invest your own personal time into learning all of these things. You need to discard the old rules and old way of learning, which is you need to go to university to do that. You can teach yourself almost anything. So you need to move into, jump onto the buses that are going somewhere. So, so to speak. You don't want to have buses that are stationary, that are not moving anyway. So you want to jump on a bus that's really going somewhere. And we know the technologies that are actually really moving, some of the industries that are moving somewhere. You don't want to be stuck in that. Then the sort of other last and important thing is you want to have role models. You want to have people that inspire you to achieve something. You not be a narcissist who says, okay, cool, look, all the heroes, they are wrong in some way. You want to have some people that you admire. You want to sort of develop true love, in a sense. And, one elderly man says, there's no love that's so right than admiration, best love. Love that's based on admiring the other person. And some of the heroes can be heroes in the books. Some of the heroes can be heroes on TV. Some of the heroes can be heroes in different areas different areas and different walks of life that you have never met. Some heroes might even be dead, but you sort of respect them so much and respect what they've achieved and honor that in such a way that it motivates you to become, the next whoever, the next whoever, the next whoever. So you sort of want, a model. You're not going to be them, but they sort of inspire you to wake up every morning. And you actually feel like if you don't do that, you've let them down in a sense. So you want heroes like that. And it doesn't have to be one. It can be multiple heroes in a sense. But you want to develop true love, which is love that's based on admiration of the guys that actually did it. So I think there's a sort of, some of the areas, and I can talk about critical thinking, learn to think for yourself. Don't just listen to sort of order people. No. They're mostly wrong.
Captain, pilot.
Yeah, exactly. You don't really listen to other people. They're mostly pessimistic, and they don't believe that the future can be better. They've had so much failures that they don't think new things can actually happen. Just learn some principles from them, but be dynamic and absolutely optimistic that things can be better. And I have the capacity to be part of the great change that's coming. I think that's it. The rest people will learn as they basically go through. But if you're curious, you're a learning machine. You have great heroes that you sort of look towards, that are your role models, and you think for yourself. You don't act based on most of your advice. You're an independent thinker. You can sift through information and see what's true and what's not true. On the spectrum of wrong to absolutely true, you want to stay somewhere in the middle, but you want to think for yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's really great advice. I'm thinking if someone had advice for me, what should I have known, like probably when I was 16? I think what I should have learned then was they're not absolute heroes. It's the stories that we hear. It's just the stories that we hear. There are no absolute heroes. It's the stories that we hear. And you can create your own narrative and your own story. And it's always up to you to write the story that you want.
I guess in that bombshell, the book is still, the pages on the book are still blank. For whoever's listening to this, start writing your own story. And you've been given a template on how to, in a sense, carve your path. And yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Mace.
Good chatting. Good chatting. It was great.
Awesome.
Thank you.